All right, let's talk New Orleans Saints. Obviously, the search for the next Saints head coach is well underway. A lot of names, a lot of rumors flying, but we've got some really good insider reports that there is a clear number one. In fact, it appears like the Saints may be about to pull off one of the best hires of this offseason. Exciting news out of New Orleans. But first, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, this time of year, of course, rumors are flying across the board. You've got random people on the internet. You've got a lot of good sources saying some things as well. Everyone's trying to figure out who's going to make the big move. And sometimes in situations like this, you got to rely on the best sources. And ESPN's Dan Graziano is one of the best. And he has some insights on the New Orleans Saints coaching search. Let's pull up this report from Bleacher Report. Per ESPN's Dan Graziano, the New Orleans Saints are expected to make a strong push and, most importantly, probably land Glenn, talking about defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn, over the New York Jets and other teams. Graziano noted that the Saints and Jets are the teams Glenn is most connected to, meaning it could come down to those two squads. The Saints completed an interview with Glenn on Friday. Look, we've talked about a number of potential options for the New Orleans Saints, but probably the best option in terms of youth, talent, coaching ability, resetting the franchise. Aaron Glenn is probably at the top of the list. This would be a major get if Graziano is right, and he's one of the best in the business for the New Orleans Saints. Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this, but first, Saints fans in the comment section below. Let's post the hypothetical. Let's say the Saints get Aaron Glenn to be their next head coach. Grade that potential hire for us in the comment section below. Would you love that hire with an A? Do you think it's okay? Give it a C. Do you really hate it? Think it's an F? Whatever it is, grade this hypothetical new head coach, Aaron Glenn for the New Orleans Saints. Put it in the comment section below. But Miles, what are your thoughts on this latest news out of New Orleans?
Yeah, Nick, when you look at New Orleans Saints and you look at the Detroit Lions, I'll go over just kind of an overview of two sides of the ball that are really important. That's the defensive side of the ball. You look at one team, the team has a lot of, really prolific playmakers, a lot of guys that have tons of talent, and a team that held up relatively well this season. Then, on the other side of things, you have a team that also had a lot of playmakers, but was ravaged with injuries. Had to get guys, find guys to come in and make plays, do the best they could with what they had. And when you look at those teams, one of those defenses rated 31st in the NFL, and one of those defenses rated 5th. You'd be surprised to know the Saints, the team with the least injuries, that has the more prolific playmakers around the ball all of this season, was the team that ranked 31st. And Aaron Glenn with the Detroit Lions, a guy that took that defense that was so ravaged by injuries and allowed them to be 5th in the NFL. I think this would be an absolute home run hit out of the park for the Saints if they're able to grab a guy like Glenn. Like the article says, they're familiar with Glenn. They know him. He has ties to the team. This is a guy that's strong defensive coach. He can bring this defense from out of the depths. The offense has a lot of great pieces already too. Derek Carr can come back and be healthy. I think this team has a lot of good stuff going for it. The one thing they didn't have is good coaching. And that's what Aaron Glenn brings to the table, especially on a side of the ball that he's a specialist in, being the defensive side of the ball. I think that is the key here for the Saints. One of the worst performing defenses in the NFL. I think that they're a really good defense as far as players that they have. The potential is there, but they performed really, really bad. So I think this would be absolutely fantastic pickup for the Saints, and I'm glad that it's trending. You hear Graziano say someone is probably going to be the next head coach. That is a very good sign for the Saints.
Yeah, there's another aspect to Aaron Glenn's coaching ability that really isn't discussed, and that's the fact that he's a great big game coach. He is a clutch coach. We all saw it, of course, when we saw primetime Sunday Night Football Week 18 against the Minnesota Vikings, where that Lions defense, decimated by injuries, absolutely embarrassed and humiliated the Minnesota Vikings. It was an incredible performance. In fact, the Rams basically borrowed that same game plan to take over the Minnesota Vikings and beat them the following week in the postseason. That's all Aaron Glenn, right? It wasn't the talent for the Lions. They had a lot of guys out. That was 100% phenomenal, great coaching, big game clutch coaching. Glenn was also a guy that gave the 49ers all kind of fits in the NFC Championship game last year when the 49ers were at full strength. The Lions, due to I think a lot of dumb decisions going for it on fourth down multiple times, blew that game. That game wasn't on Aaron Glenn. His defense did a phenomenal job against a stacked 49er squad. And that's sort of the story of Aaron Glenn as a defensive coordinator over the last couple of years. great big game guy. In the big moments, he does a great job limiting offenses. We saw that in the postseason last year. I think we'll see it in the postseason this year, but we've seen it in big games. And if you look at this division right now, the NFC South, if there's one thing that you look at and look at the other three teams, the Panthers, Falcons, and Buccaneers, all three of their head coaches, when it comes to big games, clutch gene, there's a lot of question marks. You've got the Panthers. They haven't played a big game in years, so we have no idea what to expect there. They could be good, they could be terrible, complete total wild card. How about the Buccaneers? Love Todd Bowles to death. I'm personally a fan of what Bowles has done over the course of his career. He has proven himself time and time again to be a terrible big game coach. And Raheem Morris, the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, has come under massive fire for how he handled a lot of late game situations for the Atlanta Falcons. We've got both Bowles and Morris being heavily criticized as not clutch coaches. You bring in Aaron Glenn for your New Orleans Saints, suddenly you have the money time coach in that division. And we all focus on how teams need to get better, how they need to improve the roster, and it's all really important. But it's also important to understand that matchups matter. Who's in your division? Who are you going to play 6 times a year, every single year? And you have to look at the strategy around your division right now. And if you look at the other three head coaches, there's a lot of either bad leadership, bad in-game management, or unknown. You bring in a guy like Aaron Glenn, you've got great leadership, you've got great in-game management, you've got great big game coaching. This would be an outstanding hire by the New Orleans Saints. I know there's a lot of people that want them to go offense. I know there's a lot of people that are looking for a shot in the arm, and I don't disagree with that strategy necessarily. And you can still hire Aaron Glenn and then bring in an exciting young offensive coordinator to kind of balance each other out. But if you're looking to reset the New Orleans Saints and over a multi-year period, Glenn is the best guy to do it. He's the guy that can reset this culture. He's the guy that can get this team prepared to go back to big games. And when it's time for those big games, Glenn will be ready and lead the Saints team to victory. If Graziano is right, and he usually is, this would be a perfect hire for the New Orleans Saints.